purpose.
Yuri Bizminov is a former KGB agent.
Follows the statement of a very ancient Chinese philosopher, Sun Tzu, who was born 500 years BC, before Jesus Christ, who said something to the effect that fighting war on a battlefield is the most stupid and primitive way of fighting a war. The highest art of warfare is not to fight at all, but to subvert anything of value in your enemy's country, be it moral traditions, religion, respect to your authority and leaders, cultural traditions, anything. Put white against black, old against young, I don't know, wealthy against poor, and so on. Doesn't matter. As long as it disturbs society, as long as it cuts the moral fiber of a nation, it's good. And then you just take this country. When everything is subverted, when the country is disoriented and confused, when it is demoralized and then destabilized, then the crisis will come.
Within the KGB is a department that specializes in planting false stories and forged documents to distort others' perception of reality. It is the department that deals in disinformation. Department A of the KGB set up and controls the disinformation department of Czech intelligence. Ladislav Bittman was deputy director of that department when he was with Czech intelligence.
Disinformation can have a variety of forms. It's basically an information deliberately misleading that is leaked through variety of channels to the opponent to deceive him, to deceive the decision makers in the United States or Germany or Britain, or it can be a disinformation to deceive the public opinion around the world or in a specific country.
You got to be fairly good at this when you were with Czech intelligence, didn't you?
Unfortunately, I have to admit, yes.
One of Bittman's audacious schemes was to recover phony Nazi storage chests from a Czechoslovakian lake. The chests were filled with genuine Gestapo and SS documents supplied by the KGB and specifically chosen to rekindle animosity towards the Germans decades after World War II.
And I was a member of the diving team, and when I talked with few people in the service about this, we came to the conclusion that this is a very good opportunity to play a dirty game against West Germany, that we would actually put something on the bottom of the lakes and make it a big discovery. So we prepared several German chests. Supposedly they were thrown into the lakes by Germans who were just fleeing Czechoslovak territory.
The cases were brought from the bottom in front of television cameras. The documents were then displayed in an elaborate press conference aimed at weakening the solidarity of the NATO allies.
It was quite successful in Italy, in France, in Austria. The press of these countries published them, and basically the tone was anti-German. Look what these German bastards did to us during the war. And there are so many who are still living in Germany.
Who are the major targets of the disinformation campaign that you were waging? I understand there was 2 or 3 major targets.
Well, the target number 1 is, of course, the United States. It is called the enemy number 1, or the main enemy.
It's always used in that word?
That is the official term for the United States. Then the second major target was the NATO alliance. And the goal was, the objective was to work toward the dissolution of NATO, with the hope that after some few years, the tension within the organization would reach such a stage, such a level that NATO would stop existing.
NATO was formed in post-war Europe as a political and military alliance against the Soviets. But its most effective opposition now comes not from Soviet armies, but from Soviet disinformation, which continually attempts to turn one NATO ally against another. Each one of these papers appears to be a leaked U.S. government document, but they're all forgeries designed to sow dissension within NATO. This document made damaging remarks supposedly from former President Carter about both Greece and Turkey. This is a phony intelligence report on European left-wingers. This is a forged NATO document claiming to devise ways of getting support for the neutron bomb. A forged confidential State Department memo advocating economic espionage by America on her own allies. Many forgeries have been directed against Anwar Sadat, a confidential U.S. memo claiming his time is up, or false reports on former Vice President Mondale's remarks that neither Sadat nor Begin are viable leaders. There have been forgeries released to show American suppression of Islam, the religion of its oil suppliers. Yet perhaps the most successful Soviet disinformation attack was on the KGB's main competition, the CIA. It began with an agreement in the mid-60s between the East German and Czech intelligence services.
The two disinformation departments, again under the supervision of the Soviets, decided to start a long-term operation against the CIA, making life as hard as possible for CIA. That is to label many American diplomats, politicians, cultural representatives abroad as CIA agents and paralyze their positions. Specifically in 1966, the first major operation was to prepare a book which is called Who is Who in CIA.
The book, Who's Who in CIA, was the beginning of the exposés that seriously undermined American intelligence capabilities for almost a decade. So powerful was the impact of this book that its imitators, like Philip Agee's Covert Action Information Bulletin, frequently refer to it as source material, as do other major news sources. It was used as a source in this ABC nightly news television broadcast in November 1980, claiming that the Reverend Jim Jones had a secret CIA associate before the Guyana massacre.
This man, Richard Dwyer, is the focal point of many of the questions surrounding the possible CIA involvement at Jonestown. He's a career diplomat who served in sensitive posts throughout the Mideast. 2 years ago, he was the deputy mission chief in Guyana. He is listed as a CIA agent in a publication that for years has specialized in such allegations. The CIA denies the accusation.
But it was Ladislav Bittman who was one of the real authors of Who's Who in CIA. And although it was not published under his name, the book received exactly the attention he hoped it would.
Shortly after coming to the United States, I found this book in many bookstores. I have it at home. And for example, it was quoted by the Covert Action Bulletin, or
is this AG's group, the group?
Yes, that's right. It's
Agee.
one of the major sources of information about CIA man. That's, of course, that's ironic because that is a communist disinformation.
Konstantin Hanf is a New York-based journalist for Polish-language newspapers in North America. When he decided to expose communist agents in the U.S., the long reach of the KGB influenced his life.
76, we started a wave of exposure of Soviet and Polish communist intelligence network, especially here in New York. We exposed agents mostly working around the United Nations.
What agents were these? Who were they working for?
For the KGB.
Any other?
Polish Communist Intelligence Service, which is actually nothing but an arm of KGB too.
Shortly after his exposés of the KGB in New York, Hanf's stories were published in a heavily ethnic area in Winnipeg, several thousand miles to the west, by the weekly newspaper Czas, the Polish Times. In July 1978, on a day the paper had not planned to publish, a bizarre edition of the weekly was put into circulation with articles and semi-nude photos designed to offend its conservative and older readership.
It was done in a very clever way, you know, because the look of it was exactly the same as we would have printed, you know. But some things struck us right away. For example, right on the front page is that beautifully breasted women, you know, which we wouldn't have never put into a paper simply for different reasons, you know. But our readers are mostly middle-aged people who would never dream of doing anything like that, you know. Inside the paper, we have a picture of one of our correspondents in the uniform of a German Wehrmacht, you know, and the letter supposedly written by a Jewish writer referring to our journalist, a contributor to the paper, Mr. Hanf, as a war criminal, Nazi war criminal. The funny part of it is that when the war ended, he was about 18 years old, you know, and yet they said that he was high-ranking officer, you know, that he has killed so many Jews and this and that, you know. And there's another article portraying Mr. Hanf as an agent of, you take it, KGB, CIA, FBI, everything under the sun.
It has become a classic case of Soviet bloc disinformation on a very personal level. The charges against Hanf were also made in a letter supposedly written by the Jewish Defense League of New York, and the letter was sent out to advertisers of the newspaper, informing them that Chas was harboring a Nazi war criminal.
I am Polish from my belief and from my birth and from my persuasion, I would say, but my father was a German, so my engagement in the German army was not incidental, actually, because...
How long were you in the German army, and just what did you do?
I was a regular soldier. I was drafted in March of 44.
March 1944?
Yes, when I was 17 and a half of age. And in February of 45, I was captured by the Soviets.
The accusing letter was revealed to be a forgery when the real Jewish Defense League examined this and declared it had not been written on their stationery, and also that they had never accused Mr. Hanf of any war crimes.
What effect would this have had on your readership? What effect did this have on your advertisers? I mean, what was it?
Well, obviously, I think the main aim was to stop Chas being published and have the same editorial policy as it was, you know, since Mr. Mroczkowski took over. And they wanted, I'm sure, to create panic on the board of directors so that we would fire him and get some woolly-headed fellow, you know, which would be a little bit softer on communism.
Yeah, there is a long-term plan and strategy how to frighten prominent exiles who are politically active, or organizations that are very anti-Soviet or anti-communist. And I have to admit that this is a relatively an easy thing to do. Why? Because most exiles, most refugees or immigrants have some kind of relations with the mother country, with the people, with the relatives there, and they can be even blackmailed, because imagine that you have a mother there and somebody comes and says, so if you don't cooperate, or if you continue speaking against us, your mother will have a very tough life, my dear friend.